Ooh, 5 years ago, well, almost 5 years ago, when the world shut down, I turned to plants because honestly, I just needed something to occupy my mind and take the anxiety down from the crazy levels where it was when everything locked down. You know, in New York City, we're constantly on the go, just like from one place to the next. And that probably was the first time that I actually sat down to spend a really good amount of time at home. Hold on, I'm gonna wipe this. I can literally see the cloudiness. Is that better? So anyway, that was the first time that I was spending basically a big chunk of time at home, and it really forced me to look around and reevaluate my surroundings. I've always lived in, not always, I've lived in a variety of apartments in New York City, some more charming than others, but this one is in a high-rise building, and I love it because it's flooded with natural light, but it is definitely a bit of a box, and nothing brought that home like being locked down and actually just looking around and seeing it as more than a place where we eat and sleep. I realized that actually the surroundings were not necessarily bringing me joy, so I decided to order a plant. Well, I was going to order one, but then I ended up getting three, which in hindsight probably should have been a sign. Yeah, I ordered a Monstera deliciosa. It was a tiny baby one. Uh, I got a snake plant because everyone said those are really, really super easy to care for. And I got a yucca because I loved the look of it and I wanted something with some height that I could put into one of the empty corners. I knew that we got great light in here, so I thought, the yucca sounds like a no brainer. And I'm telling you, I poured so much love, attention, and care into those three plants that before you knew it, I was just constantly scrolling on social media, looking at plant accounts, and just fell harder and harder for them. And so began the collecting of tons and tons of houseplants. As I got deeper into the sort of plant community, if you would, I unlocked different varieties that I liked. I got into aroids, which basically just exploded my whole habits because I think I started with I went from philodendrons to alocasias to anthuriums. That seems to be everyone's pipeline. I discovered importing, yeah, in those days, plants were probably slightly less readily aroids were slightly less readily available than they are now. So a lot of them had to be imported, and that added a different layer of fun to the hobby. I just had a lot of fun with it. Once you add importing to the mix, you're not really going to import one plant, right? So that meant every time I got a batch of imports, I was probably getting like 10, 15 plants at a time before you knew. And then obviously I discovered the joys of propagation. Before you knew it, I looked around and had well over 100 plants, which for a time honestly was fantastic. There's nothing like always having something new growing, something exciting happening in a different corner of the apartment. Now, having over 100 plants was delightful, lots of fun. I really, really enjoyed caring for them. But for me, the turning point came this summer. In the summer, we went on a holiday for 2.5, maybe almost 3 weeks. We went to London to visit my family. We went to Northern Ireland. We went to Portugal. We had just had a really nice time. And while we were gone, I hired someone to water my plants and instructed them to water them the way I would, which is twice a week in the summer. That's because this apartment has southern exposure, so that window gets hot in the summer months. There's a lot of light in here, and the plants do dry out fairly quickly, which is what I want in terms of healthy growth, because I want to be able to water them very frequently to make up for the lower humidity in here. But it just didn't pan out that way because the person I asked to water them simply did not care for them. And it got me thinking, why do I have so many that it would be overwhelming for someone who comes in to water them, to take care of them? And I really had to look around as I was trying to nurse some of them back to health and ask myself, do I absolutely love every single one of these plants? Because what was, of course, happening is there were so many that the things that I would have done in the beginning to turn them all into incredible specimens had fallen by the wayside. And so that was a huge turning point for me, as I therefore thought to myself, actually, I want to be more intentional with my plant care. You know, I want to grow them because I love them. I want to grow them into spectacular specimens, but most of all, I want whatever I put in any given location in the apartment to enhance the space. I don't want it to take over. I don't want it to be the only thing about the space. I want it to really, really give the space that extra bit of something that brings it to life, which is what my intention was with plants in the first place, right? I never intended to live in a greenhouse. I want a lush oasis jungle style place, but I want my love for warm decor, for natural materials, for a slightly more modern style to still come through. I don't want the plants to dominate absolutely. Well, actually, that's not true. I do love having a plant dominant space, but I want it to be intentional. So, with this in mind, here are some changes I've made. Number one, no more propagations. I know that sounds absolutely wild, but all the propagations lying around in little glass vessels that I don't pot up for months, or when I do pot up, I never really care about them, that's going to end. I will only propagate a plant if it's because I'm putting it back into the same pot, or I'm extending a moss pole, or something is just looking really, really bare and I want to make it look better. That is when you will see me doing propagations. Outside of that, I'm not propagating because I don't need more plants. I also have been going through the space and really trying to honestly ask myself if I'm holding on to a particular plant because I like it or if I just have it because I've had it for a long time. You know, 4.5 years is a long time to have a plant, grow it from a seedling into this big specimen, and then decide to let it go. But I have been going through that process, right? I've let quite a few plants go. I haven't done a count recently to see how many I have, but it's unlikely to be 100. I'm not sure. I don't want to say that for certain because I haven't counted yet. But I am asking myself every time I do plant care, do I love this plant? Do I want this plant? Do I need this plant to continue to be happy in the space? Does this plant enhance the space? Does it make it better? Does it bring my vision for the space to life? So if I find that that's not the case, then out they go. This is the part of the apartment that I love the most, and at the same time, I am the most excited to just get in there and mix it up a bit. For as long as I can remember, well, not as long as I can, but for the longest time now, this Monstera, this guy, has basically dominated this entire space. And like I said, I chopped it, and it was, for a spell, it was sort of upright and it looked a lot better. But of course, as Monsteras do, it's back and has taken over everything again. So I don't know what I want to do with it, to be honest. It's just its inclination is to grow outward and big, and if it was growing straight up, I wouldn't mind. But yeah, I don't think long term keeping that Monstera there is going to work, especially because I also have my Monstera Thai constellation. Now, this Thai constellation was on the floor, and I've just moved it and put it up here. And honestly, I think it looks a lot better. But again, this is another corner that I just don't care for. The Billietier is just kind of, I don't know. It just doesn't look right here. This corner needs some TLC. It needs some styling, maybe some big velvet leaves growing behind Thai constellation. Something to just make the space look more put together. As my anthuriums are starting to get some size on them, some of them are going to be coming out into the living room. I'm slowly but surely getting rid of my grow tent. I have 2 plants left in the grow tent right now, so there's going to be a lot of changes in here. One of the biggest drivers for this change is these anthuriums. I am absolutely obsessed with the beauty of these guys. I just wish they had more space to shine. The trouble is, there aren't that many locations in the apartment where they can be as happy as they are here. And I know that the Monstera is just taking up precious real estate. So I'm having a think. I'm having a think about what that's going to look like in the long run. The fact that my Anthurium luxurians, stunning though it is buried all the way back here instead of being front and center just makes no sense, right? So I want to rearrange these. I have a couple of moss poles to extend, and I don't know. I want to reconfigure things so that we can see them. They can shine and be who they are destined to be. With the shift to being more intentional about how I care for the plants, I also am going to be very, very particular about what they look like. So I've been known to neglect cutting off the yellow leaves for a while, or as the plants get bigger and wilder, I have in the past enjoyed that very jungly look, and I still do. But I have noticed that when I make the effort to cut something back because it is so overgrown within my space, I feel like I can breathe better. The plant looks better. I'm happier. The most recent example of this was my big Monstera deliciosa. Now there are 2 vines in that pot, and it's ridiculous for the space. It doesn't make sense. So I recently took it down. I chopped one of the vines off. Now it's still pretty large. So after the chop, I looked at it and I thought, oh my gosh, it looks so much better in that space. Huge improvement. That space looks exactly like I would have wanted it to. But of course, as Monstera deliciosas want to do, it has since grown some more. And I'm questioning again, actually, whether I'm going to keep it in the long run or not. I'm not entirely sure. All this to say that nothing is sacred, and I'm moving away from growing plants for the sake of growing them to creating beautiful botanical masterpieces that speak to me, that I am very happy with. I'm getting back to one of the major things I did in the beginning, which was put a lot of energy into my plant and pot pairings. The more plants I had, the more that sort of fell by the wayside. And the reason for that is when you have a lot of plants and a lot of them are small, they go through changes very rapidly. So you go from a small pot to a slightly bigger, medium, you end up buying an insane amount of cover pots for your plants, and it's not financially feasible. It's not practical, and you will end up with loads of small pots that you have no use for, which is what has happened to me in the past, and it's why I stopped buying as many cash pots and just thinking to myself, actually, I'll let the plants mature a bit more before I decide what pot I want to put them in. So I'm now sort of slowly getting back to making sure that all my plastic pots have a nice cash pot around them. I personally favor a more natural sort of look. I love cement pots, but when you have as many as I do, it's not it's not practical. You can't keep buying loads and loads of cement pots. So I've had to think about that, because it's more than just having the plant. It's about the whole look, right? The entire look. So it is important to me to put a bit more time and effort into having the entire plant look the way I want it to. And also just rethinking some of my placement choices, restyling everything, and changing the look because it feels a little bit stale in here. I have my major sort of plant areas and I love the way they look, but change is good, right? Change is good. So I think it's time to be more intentional about things. It's time to put a plant in a spot because I think, oh, this is going to look stunning here. I will, of course, always balance it with the plant's needs and wanting the plants to thrive. But it's going to be really, really refreshing to think about the aesthetics of things as one of the primary drivers again, instead of just the botanical wonder of the plant, which is great. It's fantastic, but it's not the only reason that I grow them. And so I do think it's time to remember that. I want to look in a corner and see a plant and pot combination there and just have the biggest smile on my face, because that's what it should be, right? I'm also looking at maybe refreshing other aspects of the apartment, maybe some different paint in some places, just rearranging a few things. So I think this is the perfect time to let the plants do what they do best and enhance the space instead of taking it all over. Don't worry, this will never not be Monef's jungle. It's always going to be jungly, lush, and beautiful. But I just think with a little bit of extra care and effort, it can be a more intentional, well designed, well cared for, and practical, dare I say. It can be the kind of space where you come in and individual plants that are truly stunning and spectacular actually get the chance to stand out. You actually look at them and think, wow, I'm blown away by that. That is an incredible specimen. And that's what I want. That's what my hope is. That is what my focus is right now. And I can't wait to bring you all along for the journey. I can't wait to show you the final outcome. I think it's going to be something truly incredible.